Good morning. My name is John Brahm, and I'm the winemaster at Arbor Hill Winery. Today we're out in the vineyard with Jerry Busby, and Jerry is an accomplished grape pruner. How many years we've been doing this, Jerry?
Oh God, probably long time.
30 years?
20, 30, sure, 30 at least.
At least 30 years.
I would say.
Now, the interesting thing is, go ahead, Jerry, you can continue on. What we're trying to do, what Jerry's doing, he's a professional pruner. He's been doing this a long time, so he knows exactly what he's doing. What we have to do is, and he does this almost automatically because he's been doing it so long, you have to essentially look at the vine and say, did this vine produce the same amount of vegetative growth as it did the year before? In which case, I will leave the same number of buds, each of these being a bud. We call this a node, and that's where the bud is located. So if we determine that this vine, because of the season and because of the crop, has a diminished amount of growth this year, then we will leave fewer buds on the vine for this next year. And that way the vine itself can, in a sense, regulate itself. And I suspect that's what's happening in this vineyard because we had a very good season and we had a very good crop in this vineyard. So Jerry, would you say you're cutting them back a little bit?
Yep.
And when we say cutting back a little bit, that means we aren't leaving quite as many buds. Now this is extremely important because what Jerry is actually doing here, this is 2017, winter. He is actually determining a major portion of the crop for 2018. An interesting question that I used to get a lot from people was, oh, harvest is over. What do you do the rest of the year? Do you go on vacation? And the answer is absolutely not. Now, harvest covers a 6-week period from mid-September to the end of October. Pruning basically starts in November and goes all the way through to mid-March or even into April. So the pruning is the most laborious process in the vineyard and lasts at least 5 months. To give you a little better idea, it actually takes about 25 hours per acre of vineyard for pruning. So, if you got, let's say we got 10 acres, you got 250 hours, and then you can divide by 40 and so forth and so on. This block alone has 15 acres. So you multiply that by 25 and it gives you an idea how many hours Jerry is going to be spending in here this winter. Do we want more? Let's see. Do you have a question, Angela, based on what I've mentioned to you so far?
How old is the vineyard we're standing in?
This vineyard was actually planted in 1971. And the variety is Maréchal Foch, which is a French-American varietal. It is harvested early in the season, usually in mid-September. Makes a dry, semi-dry wine, and actually is the major component in our Noir wine at Arbor Hill. In this particular case, this wine is basically fresh, and for a red, it's a little on the fruity side because we don't age it in oak. So we want this to be a fresh tasting wine. So that's what we do. We have Maréchal Foch and in our Noir, and in this same vineyard location we have another variety called Rougeon, which is another French-American varietal. And then those two wines put together, and then occasionally another variety that's in this particular vineyard is called Vincent. That's an American hybrid, and Vincent has a lot of color. So if we have a year where the two other reds don't get quite the deep color that we want, we'll actually add a percentage of the Vincent variety in order to get the color that we want. So our Arbor Hill Noir is made up of basically 3 different varieties. The base always being the Marichal Foch, and the other 2 varieties will change depending upon availability and being able to match pretty much the same flavor profile that we had for the previous year.
I do have another question that we get a lot. Iced wine. Since we're standing in the snow, tell us a little bit about iced wine.
This would be a perfect day for ice wine. Ice wine, basically, the name comes from Germany, which was originally ISE, Eiswein. And basically that is making wine from frozen grapes. So according to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearm, in order to make ice wine, the grapes actually have to be frozen in the vineyard. You pick the grapes frozen, and when I say frozen, we're talking temperatures down into the mid-20s, where water freezes at 32. Grapes don't, because they have mass and they have sugar. So you actually have to wait till they get down into the mid-20s before the berries will actually freeze. So you can imagine picking grapes 25 degrees out here today, and then taking the grapes to the winery and having them pressed. You may have noticed in the marketplace that ice wine is more expensive than regular wine. And the reason is, when these frozen grapes are pressed, the frozen part is actually water. And that remains as ice, and the liquid is mostly the sugar that's in the grape. So the freezing process actually concentrates the sugar, and we throw away quite a bit of the water because it was in the form of ice, and that does not get melted into the wine. It's essentially thrown away. So let's say that we get, and this is pretty normal, you get 30 to 40% as much juice from a variety that you would have. So let's assume that we have a normal variety would be 200 gallons per ton. So 30% of that would be like 60 gallons. So now what you've essentially done is increase the price of the grapes 3 times, because there's a certain cost in producing the vines, and now we're getting 1/3 as much of the juice. Therefore, it's 3 times as expensive to produce the wine.
Very good. Thank you very much.